In this video, we're going to discuss the difference between a change in supply and a change in quantity supplied. They sound similar, but they're different. So when there's a change in price, so the price of a good or service goes up or down, that's going to lead to a change in the quantity supplied, which is a movement along the supply curve. So let me show you, for example. So let's say we've got our graph here, and that this is our upward sloping supply curve. Let's call that S1. So if there's a change in price of whatever this good is, we're just going to move from one point along the supply curve to another point along the supply curve. We're not going to draw a whole new supply curve. However, if there's a change in something other than price, let's say there's an earthquake that affects the supply of the good, or there's a change in the price of factors of production, or there's a new technology that increases supply, then we're going to have a change in supply, not just the quantity supplied, a change in supply, which is going to require a whole new curve. We're going to have a shift of the supply curve. So let's say, for example, there was an increase in supply, then the supply curve is going to shift to the right, and we're going to draw a whole new curve, and we'll call that S2. Conversely, if there was a decrease in supply, we would have a shift to the left. So I want to show you an example that'll make it a little bit easier to understand. So let's say that we have a situation where we have a supply schedule here where we can look at each different price. So let's say this is the market for coffee, for example. So this is coffee, and let's say that the price is dollars per pound or something like that, and the quantity supplied is millions of pounds of coffee. So at $1 per pound, producers are willing to supply 3 million pounds of coffee and so forth. So we've got our supply curve. Now, if I were to ask you what would happen if the price decreased, so what would happen if the price went, let's say it decreased from $5 from 5 to 3, from $5 to 3, so from here to here. Now, what we can see is that there's going to be a change in the quantity supplied of 15 to 9. Right, so it's going to go from 15 at $5 a pound. The producers were willing to supply 15 million pounds, but now the price has fallen. They're only willing to supply 9 million. Right, and so we can look at our graph. So here's $5 a pound. We're right here, and now we have gone to $3 a pound right here. If you just map that out, we end up right here. Okay, so we have moved along the curve. We haven't drawn a new curve. We've just moved along the curve because there was a change in the price. Holding everything else constant, we're assuming nothing changed except the price. Now, let's pretend that something else happened that completely changed supply, not the price, not just the price. So something other than price. Let's say that it was weather. Let's say it was weather, and let's say there was a hurricane or tsunami or something that happened, and it wiped out coffee plantations in Costa Rica. So if it wiped out a bunch of coffee plantations, then we're going to see, well, there's going to be a decrease in supply of coffee, right? So there's going to be a decrease in the supply because this natural disaster came and wiped out a bunch of coffee plantations. So this does not have to do with the price, right? Now it might have an effect on the price, and we'll talk about that. But this, we're not just saying what happened if producers said that they went from $5 to $3 or something like that. How do we move along the curve? We're not talking about that now. We're saying that some kind of thing happened other than price, and now it has created where we basically need an entirely new supply curve. We need a new supply curve, and so here's our new supply schedule. So this is the new quantity supplied. Up here was the old. This was before the natural disaster. So I've just got this is the supply curve before the natural disaster. So our new supply curve is going to look like this. And if you see, for example, at a price of $1, the quantity supplied is 0, right? So we would end up, that point would be right here. And so that corresponds to our supply schedule. But now I'll call this S2. And you see that we have shifted to the left. So notice, a change in quantity supplied is we're moving along the curve. We're not drawing a new curve. However, when we have a change in supply, we're actually shifting the curve. We're moving it. And because we had a decrease in supply, we're moving that curve. We have a whole new curve. Why do we have a whole new curve? Because at each price, the quantity supplied, the quantity that producers are willing to supply at that price is now different than before. So before, at a price of $1, quantity supplied was 3. Now at a price of $1, quantity supplied is 0, and so forth. Each price, now there is a new quantity supplied, so we need a whole new curve. Now, if you were to ask, well, what is going to happen now? What's going to happen now to price? Well, the price of coffee, for example. So to know that, we would need to draw a demand curve. So here's just a generic downward sloping demand curve. I don't have any data points there. Let's just say that this is our demand curve. Now, our original equilibrium was this S1 and D where they intersect. So that's our original equilibrium. And we'll give myself a little space. So we'll say that was Q1. And then here is P1. And now our new equilibrium is going to be right here where S2, the new supply curve, intersects with demand. And now we're going to have Q2 and we're going to have P2. So you see that the price has increased and the quantity has decreased. It makes sense, right? If a bunch of coffee plantations are wiped out, that's going to decrease the supply of coffee. There's going to be less coffee and it's going to get more expensive. Now, again, this price effect is different from when I said not price is leading to a change in supply. I'm not saying that a change in supply has no effect on price. I'm saying that when we think about whether there's a change in quantity supplied or a change in supply, what we're thinking about is what is leading to this change that we're asking about. So in the first example, I just asked you what happened if the price decreased from 5 to 3. So we just move along our curve because that's the only thing that happened was price changed, and I asked you what happened to supply. So there was a change in quantity supplied. However, in the second example, something other than price changed. It was the weather. And so the weather decreased the supply. Now, because it decreases supply and we drew a new supply curve, we're able to see that the price of the good would ultimately increase.